Hello and welcome back to Come to the Couch and Chat. I got it right this week. All right. So, again, guys, this is a series talk where we're going to have a discussion about how we do life together better. And so, in the last 2 weeks, we talked about uh, how do we build generational wealth from the topics of uh, just changing the mindset, right? So recall the first mindset was scarcity, in which we've been taught, fed, bred, and marketed to. And then the second one was abundance, right? And so to move from scarcity to abundance, we have to move from that fear to understanding what the wealthy understand. They understand that even though resources may be limited, money exchanges hands at an unlimited amount of rate. And because of that, we don't work for money. We don't change dollars for hours. We earn and attract money to ourselves by creating valuable things and goods and services. After that, we then transitioned to talking about budgeting sucks. So we looked at how we could mindfully manage our cash. Remember, wealth is our health, right? And so, in respects to that, we want to make sure that we're moving in a way where we're mindfully managing our cash, just like we mindfully eat. Now, today's subject, we're going to be talking and getting into some details. So I hope you have your pencils, paper, pens, whatever you want to use, because we're going to be going a little bit technical today. But these things are crucial for your financial literacy, education, and also for you to do better, be better in your finances. Okay. So today's topic, we're talking about leverage and credit. Okay. So I want you to understand that to before we get there, we have to have our we have to be mindfully managing our cash, right? Before we can talk about leveraging, because leveraging is utilizing other people's money to go to work for us. You see, leverage and credit are tools that are going to be used to accelerate our wealth and move us to the next level at an exponential rate. But in order to do that, we have to learn the rules of it and we have to have some financial literacy. So, what is leverage? In a nutshell, leverage is using other people's money, using borrowed money to accelerate your wealth. Now, the rule to that we learned last week. We learned one crucial rule to that last week, and that rule was that we never borrow to consume. We never borrow to do a temporary thing. We borrow to purchase cash flowing assets, and that's going to give us our passive income that leads to our financial freedom, right? And so with leveraging, again, the foundational rule is we do not borrow to consume. We borrow to purchase cash flowing assets to put ourselves in a better position. Now, what else I want you to understand is this. This is a key factor. I want you to understand that debt is not a bad thing. Okay? So before I go there, there's 6 things I want you to understand, 6 things I want you to really keep in mind. First thing I want you to understand and write down is income. Okay? We have to know what income is. We have to know then what expenses are. After that, we need to know what assets are, liabilities, the word cash, and lastly, flow. Okay? Those 6 things that are crucial to financial literacy and financial understanding for our for us to talk about leverage. Again, those things are income, expenses, assets, liabilities, cash, and flow. Okay, so here's the thing. I want you to understand this is that we've been taught incorrectly that two major things that keep us in a reductionist thinking, keep us in scarcity, keeps us from accelerating our wealth. The first thing we taught is that we have to be saved. We have to be savers. Let me tell you something. Savers are losers. And let me tell you why savers are losers. Remember this date, 1971. I believe it was August 13, 1971. What happened in 1971? Well, what happened in 1971 is President Richard Nixon took the dollar off of the gold standard, and that was the precipice, or that was the beginning of the U.S. printing money. Now, why is that saying that savers are losers? What that says is this, is that because you print money, you dilute the value of the money. Therefore, if you're saving, you cannot save at a rate that outpaces the way the government prints money. And so from a run from 1971 to 2000, everything was gravy, baby. So there wasn't that much printing of the money. Everything was fine. That's where you had the millionaire next door. That's where you were saying if you just put your money in the stock market and you have in your retirement accounts, you'd be just okay. But then after 2000, we've had three major crashes: Q1, Q2, Q3, which is QE1, QE2, QE3. That stands for quantitative easing 1, 2, and 3. In simple terms, quantitative easing is the way quantitative easing is nothing more than the Federal Reserve printing more money to bail out the banks and all these big corporations. That's all it is. When they print more money, money then loses its value. And therefore, if you're saving, you cannot save the money and to keep up with that. They just printed $9 trillion. Let me tell you something. Our debt is somewhere over $32 trillion. Do you know how long it would take for you to count from zero to $32 trillion consecutively? Over 16,000 years. What was happening 16,000 years ago? The cavemen. That's how much money they printed. Okay? So, number one, savers are losers. Second thing I want you to understand, debt is money. Debt is money. How is debt money? Well, remember those six things I told you about? Income, expenses, assets, liability, cash, flow. Well, if you work a job, your paycheck is an income to you, but is a debt to the company. You exchange your values, your goods and services, right? And then the company is indebted to you. So debt is money. So just the philosophy of I have to get out of debt, become debt free, we have to change that thinking. All right. So here's why I said the 6 points of income X, Y, and Z. Because another thing is that we often view liabilities as assets. Assets are things you own. Liabilities are things that you owe. Okay. And so oftentimes one of the big misconceptions is if I own a home, that's an asset. If you own a home, you paid the house off, and that's it, you have a liability on your hand. That is not an asset. I own the home, Alex. How's that a liability? See, you have to understand the final two words, the words cash and flow. You have to follow how the cash flows throughout the system. You see, if your cash is flowing into paying for that house and nothing else is happening, that's dead money, it's a liability. Now, on the other hand, if you were to tap into the equity into your home and take that out and then make other purchases for, not for consuming, but purchases for purchasing other assets for cash flowing, then your house becomes an asset. But we have to learn the rules of the game, and this is one of them. So we have to know what assets are. We have to really know what liabilities are. But the only way we know those are by how cash flows in and out. So again, I want you guys to understand that we're talking about leverage. Leveraging is using other people's money for you to then be able to uh, accelerate your wealth. In order to do that, we have to first understand those six major principles: income, expenses, assets, liabilities, cash, and then flow, and how they play into one another. Okay, so now I have a video that I want to show you for financial literacy and for us to really understand. I'll break that down a little bit more. Video, please. And for us here, you just listen.
These two things are not the proper Christian response to financial literacy. Number one, money is not everything. Have you heard someone say that and you're thinking, duh? The only part they leave out is God Himself is the one that said money answers everything. The number two improper Christian response to financial literacy is an overemphasis on becoming debt free. If you're going to be in business, the inability to distinguish good debt and bad debt could prove counterproductive. Having good debt is better than being debt free. Most Christian financial experts will tell you to be debt free, while most sinners will tell you to win the money game. That's just backwards. When Jesus talked about the kingdom of God, He talked about it in context of three economies: real estate, agriculture, and banking. And a huge part of the commentary was around credit, how you handle what does not belong to you. In the business world, we call it OPM, other people's money. In the Gospels, Jesus called it stewardship. Am I saying go into debt? To assume that question is negative shows where we're not educated. When we talk about debt, the mistake we make is featuring all debt is evil. Christian financial literacy should not be reduced to an attempt at babysitting adults into wise spending habits. That's the line of separation between consumer debt and OPM. If people of faith are going to build wealth, we're going to need holistic financial education, not just a debt-free class.
So at the end of the day, as we see, really, if we're serious about building wealth, generational wealth, we have to understand how to use debt. We have to understand the rules of how to utilize debt for the good, right? So there's two types of debt: good debt and bad debt. The bad debt is when you borrow to consume. The good debt is when you borrow to buy cash flowing assets to then uh, purchase more assets. That's the name and the rule of the game. Now, before we can even talk about using good debt or bad debt, we have to have a foundation, and that foundation is you have to have good credit. You see, the access to that other people's money is having good stewardship, and that good stewardship is literally captured into credit. So I'm going to pass it over to Pastor Pam, and she's going to run through all the things that are related to credit.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and I thank Alex for that introduction. Again, my name is Pastor Pamela Thomas, and it is my privilege to spend the next 33 minutes talking about a topic that is dear to my heart, a topic that has personally changed my life. And that topic that we're going to talk about tonight is credit. If you take a survey and if you ask people to raise their hands, or people that are watching on chat and ask you, have you heard the word credit? I'm quite sure everybody has a different definition of what credit is. As I am connecting the dots that Alex talked about, borrowing other people's money, is that we have to truly understand what credit is. And so tonight I pray that you have your paper and your pens, and then you're open to get some more knowledge, because truly knowledge is power when it's acted upon. And so the first thing that we're going to discuss tonight is, what is credit? When we talk about what is credit, there are three different definitions. There really are more, but for what we're talking about tonight, using other people's money, credit is the ability, and that's the key word, the ability to borrow money and pay it back along with interest. Another definition for credit is, it's your history of borrowing and repaying money back. And then lastly, credit is how much money you can borrow. Say if you have a credit card and they say your credit is $500 limit, that's your credit. So again, when we talk about what credit is, again, it's the ability to borrow money and pay it back with interest. It's your history of borrowing and paying back money. And then also is how much money you can borrow. So the next question we're going to answer tonight is, why do we need credit? We know that it was just mentioned before that one of the reasons why we need credit is that credit affords you various opportunities. If you're looking to go into business and you don't have all the money, well, credit is an avenue that you can accomplish that goal. The second reason why we need credit is that credit can be a powerful tool in achieving your goals. Again, credit is a powerful tool in achieving your goals. The third reason why we say, why do we need credit? And when I'm talking about credit, I'm talking about good credit. Good credit can lead you to a lower interest rate, which can be used to save money on interest payments, and also increase your emergency fund, or some might say the peace of mind fund. And so these are three reasons why, again, why we need to have credit. And I like to sum it up this way, that when we talk about credit, credit really is a tool. And the more skillful you are with this tool, the more that you can do, again, these three things that are outlined. The opportunities that come up, achieving your goals, again, having lower interest rates, because if you're going to use other people's money, you want to make sure you're using it at the lowest rate. And what's going to help you is by having a good credit score. So you say, well, Pastor Pam, what type of credit is there? Because again, if we're going to use other people's monies, we need to understand what are the types of credit that we need to be aware of. The first type of credit that we need to be aware of is what we call revolving credit. When you talk about revolving credit, you're talking about credit that you get to use over and over. You're talking about credit where if you don't spend the money, it's still available to you. When we talk about revolving credit, we're talking about credit cards. We're talking about personal loans. We're talking about business lines of credit, personal lines of credit. You're talking about what we call a HELOC, which is a home equity of loans. And so, again, we have to know what type of credit. And so when we also talk about revolving credit, understand that there is a difference between a credit card and a charge card. And the difference is when you talk about a charge card is a card that allows you to charge. But when that bill comes due, you pay that bill in full. Charge cards are known as American Express. That is not where you can charge and put minimum payments. Your minimum payments are done on credit cards. Okay, so understand the difference between a charge card and a credit card. The other thing that you have to understand about charge cards is that you pay a fee yearly for a charge card, ranging from $900. The highest that I've seen is $1,500, just to carry their name. And I tell people, for me personally, I don't pay anybody to use their credit cards. I don't pay no annual fee to use nobody's credit cards. That's just me. The second type of credit you have is what we call installment credit. Your installment credits are loans that you get at a lump sum that have set amount of payments. Examples of installment loans are your car loans, your mortgages, your student loans. Those are examples of installment credit. And then lastly, you have what we call service credit. Service credit is where you pay for services, where you receive services, and then you pay for them later. Examples would be your cell phone. Examples would be your utilities. Your example would be like your cable. All of those are service credit. And so when we look at the different types of credit, this information will help us when we talk about how our credit, how we have access to it. And for some people who want to know how do they rebuild their credit, it's going to involve these types of credit, and we'll cover that later. The next thing that we want to talk about is we're going to talk about the components of accessing or having access to credit. And these are just two of the components, because one of the other two components that you have to have when accessing credit will involve your history at work. It would also involve your income. But the two that we're going to focus on tonight is your credit report and your credit score. And so often people use those two words interchangeably, credit report and credit score, but they work together, but they have a different meaning. And so again, if we're going to use other people's money, where we can access those things that we desire, we have to have a good understanding of what is my credit report, what is my credit score, and then the other word I want to throw in there, what is my credit history? Because we have to realize all of those play a factor And to what we're going to close on is that credit score. And so when we talk about the credit report, that's going to be the first one that we're going to address, is the credit report. What is a credit report? Your credit report is a record of your history, managing and repaying debt that's compiled by the credit bureaus. In other words, your credit report is a part of me finding out about your financial behavior. Because from a lending institution, your credit report tells me a lot about your financial behavior. Now, one of the things, because I worked in the credit industry, that the credit industry does not take in consideration if you have an unexpected interruption in your cash flow. And that is why it's so important that we have those emergency funds set aside. Because somebody said, well, I really am not that bad when it comes to making my payments. But again, I've had an unscheduled interruption in my cash flow, where it can be that someone has lost their job. It could be where someone may have died who was the breadwinner, or it could have been where someone has had an unexpected medical event that happened in their lives where it was beyond their control. Well, from a lender standpoint of view, lenders don't look at that. Only thing that they look at is, I want to see how you are managing your money. I want to see how you are paying me back. So that is what matters to me as a lender. And so you say, well, how do I get my credit report? What happens is we have three major credit bureaus. We have Equifax, we have Experian, and we have TransUnion. And what happens is the lenders, whoever you are borrowing money from, they report to all three of these agencies. And these agencies are the ones that keeps that information. Now, depending on where you are and what you are applying for, one of these may be the main one. Now, like in South Florida, we primarily use Equifax. And the other parts of the nation, they may use TransUnion or Experian. But you have a credit score from each one of these. When we talk about our credit report, understand that your credit report includes several things. It includes your credit accounts. Every account that you have open is going to be in your credit report. Public record information is going to be in your credit report, whether you filed bankruptcy, whether you filed foreclosure, whether you have something in collections, if you have any type of judgments, if you have any medical debt that's over $500, it's going to appear on your credit report. And also what's on your credit report are all the entities that have asked to see your report. By show of hands, how many of you have received those pre-approved letters in the mail saying that you've been pre-approved by this company for X amount of credit? Well, what they've done is that what they've done is what we call a soft inquiry. That they look to say, okay, this person looks like they're worth us giving them credit. But that's what they do. They look at your report to determine. Now, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that for your credit report plays an important role in determining your credit score. And that's why I always encourage individuals, at least once a year, order your credit report. Look over your credit report to make sure that all the information that's contained there is correct. If there's any information that is not correct, you can have that removed from your credit report. Because again, your credit report, it plays a very important role in your credit score. So don't take it for granted that everything that's being reported to these agencies are correct. If you find something that's incorrect, there's letters that you can send that they are obligated to remove any incorrect information. And so, for someone that may be asking the question, well, how do I build my credit? This is step one. Request your credit report to make sure that everything is correct that's on there. A quick testimony: years ago, looked at the credit report and the information was totally wrong. Had to have it removed. So now, when we talk about our credit score, because the credit score is the one that you hear a lot if you're going to buy a car, if you're going to buy a home. They talk about your credit score, credit score, credit score. A lot of people now, they focus, okay, let's fix your credit, let's fix your credit score, let's fix your credit score. But understand, the reason why I gave all that information is so you can have a solid foundation as to why your credit score is important, how your credit score is arrived. So when we talk about your credit score is a 3-digit number that has been computed using the information from your credit report. And that's why I say it's imperative that you make sure the information on your credit report is correct, because that is how your credit score is generated. When we talk about your credit score, understand that your credit score is used by lenders to determine how responsible you are with money. But you also have to realize that there are 5 different categories that a credit score can fall into. You have 5 different categories that a credit score can fall into. And you say, well, what are those categories? The first category for your credit score is what we consider in the lending institution is poor. If you have a credit score between 300 to 579, the financial institutions consider you a risk to lend money to. So that kind of gets you out of place of trying to use other people's money, because they're going to look at you as a risk. Then we have the fair, which is between 580 and 669. You're a little bit better, but you're not 100% there. Then you have what we call a good score that falls between 670 and 739. And that's like midway in between. Then you have very good, which is 740 to 799. And then you have excellent, which is 800 to 850. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind, the higher your credit score, the lower interest rate you will pay. The lower your credit score, the higher interest rate you will pay. And so when it comes to borrowing money and using it for your advantage, you want to make sure you're on the scale where your credit score is on the high end. Real quick, I want everybody to take out a paper and pencil or just write this down and just give you an idea of how important your credit score is. If you have, say, 5 credit cards and you're paying, say, about $45 per month for each one, that's $225 a month that you're paying in credit card interest, because because they're charging you a lot. If you multiply that $225 a month by 12 months, you are paying $2,070 in interest. Now multiply that by 5 years, that's $13,500. Because the thing is that people don't look at the interest rate, because if I was to ask the average person, do you know what the interest rates are on your credit cards? And most people will not have an idea. And it's important for you to look at it. Just because they approve you and people are like, yay, happy, I'm approved. But how much money are you giving out? And that's not being a wise steward of using other people's money, because you haven't worked on your credit score where you can get the interest at the lowest rate. Because if I'm going to use other people's money, I want that to work to my advantage, which means I want to work on my credit report where my credit report and my score are high, where I can use that money at the lowest rate. So the next question is, how how are credit scores used? Credit scores are used to determine your ability, again, to repay a loan. Credit scores are used when it comes to purchasing a house or a car. Credit scores are used when it comes to renting an apartment, because your landlord is going to look, okay, I want to see how risky they are. Your credit score is used for employment. Depending on where you are employed, your credit score plays a factor, because if they see that you're over here in the poor and fair range and you're working with finances, although you may be qualified in the other areas, they will not grant you employment because of your credit score. True story, there was an individual that I was working with concerning their credit, and this individual was qualified. They had the years, but when the individual's credit report was pulled and the employer saw the person's credit score, they denied them employment. Your credit scores are used concerning your cell phones and your utilities. Your credit scores is used when it comes to your auto insurance premiums, as well as your life insurance premiums. And so when we don't know the importance or value, making sure that our credit scores are to over here in this excellence, we're losing out on money, and we're paying more than we should. And it's affecting us in one of these areas. And so the question is now, okay, how is my credit score calculated? How is my credit score calculated? Your credit score is calculated by 5 things. The first thing, your credit score is calculated based on your payment history. And that takes up 35% of your score. When we talk about my payment history, again, your payment history is how you pay your bills. Do you pay them on time? That's the biggest thing that the financial institutions are looking at. How are you paying your bill? And again, from a financial institution, we don't look at any interruptions in your cash flow. We don't look at that. Only thing we look at is how well you are paying what you borrowed. When you are late on a payment, that late payment can drop your credit score by 100 points. Being late. Now the good thing is, now if you pay your payment on the 28th day, you good. It's just if you pay it after that 30th day, that's it. So we have to be mindful, because again, from the credit industry, I'm looking at your financial behavior, because your financial behavior tells me from a credit position how you handle money, because they're in the business to make money. When we talk about your credit score is then made up of 30% of the amounts that are owed. 30% of what you owe is made up on your credit schedule. Your credit score. And when we talk about what you owe, we talk about, that means your credit utilization. And what credit utilization means, for example, here, if I have 3 credit cards, they all have a credit limit of $5,000 each. So my total access to credit at any one time is $15,000 between these 3. If I have one credit card that has a balance of $500, that means I only utilize 10%. If I have one credit card that I use $3,000, I've used 60%. If I have one at $5,000, I use $900. It puts me at 18%. What people have misunderstood is that, okay, as long as my individual credit card is not over 30%, I'm good. It's the total amount of credit that you have that you cannot use more than 30%. And so I have a total of $15,000 for 3 credit cards, which means that out of these 3 credit cards, I can't go over 30% of that $15,000. So with the numbers that we just gave, we come right under it, 29.3%. That's how we calculate your amounts that are owed. The other thing that we calculate when it comes to your credit score is your credit length. How long have you been established in borrowing money and paying money back? Some people, they get this misinformation that, okay, if I have a credit card that's been in a long time, let me close it out. And some people don't understand that when you close out credit cards, what you actually do, you shorten your credit history. And I need my credit history to be long because that's my proof that I am responsible with money. And then we have 10% concerning the type of credit. Remember, we talked about revolving credit, and installment credit, service credit, and then the last 10% deals with the new credit, what I have opened up. And this is how your credit score is calculated. Often, people, especially if they're buying a home or whatnot, they'll go through the different programs. Okay, well, I got to get my credit straight. Got to get my credit straight. They get their credit straight, but they don't maintain it, and then they drop in numbers. So understand, all of this is what makes up your credit score. Okay, so now we're going to open it up for Q&A.
I'm gonna stay in here a little bit. I'm gonna stay in here a little bit. Okay, so I hope you guys understood, just in regards to credit, right? How it's made of X, Y, and Z. Now we're going to do a little deeper dive into the credit situation, just to give you some strategies to actually improve it. Now, I recommend getting with the credit specialist to look at your individual situation, right? But when we're talking about credit, as you see, 30% it has to do with the amount that's owed, and then 30% is payment history. Now, let's take out that 130%, which is the amount owed, right? A lot of times when you see an example like this, immediately our thought is maybe you want to tackle that 60% loan, right? Because it's a huge percent. If you can tackle that, maybe you can lower this overall utilization. Or another one that Dave Ramsey loves to use is the snowball method. All methods are useful, beneficial, right? But let me give you a tool that's really going to help you out with the methodology that we're teaching. So the methodology, the tool that I'm going to teach you is called looking at it from the cash flow standpoint, the cash flow index. What the cash flow index says is this. It looks at the loan that you have, the loan amount divided by the minimum payment. And what this says is this, is if your number is closer, and you times it by 100, but if the number is closer towards 50, you have a hog on your hand, because it means the minimum balance that you're paying in relation to the size of the loan is inefficient, and it's taking up a big portion of your cash flow. So we want to take care of those loans. The loans that are 100 and plus, those are more efficient loans. So think about your student loans. Say, for example, somebody has a student loan of $100,000 and they're paying $200 a month. That's not realistic, but let's just stick with it, right? In relation to that $100,000 loan, they have a rather efficient loan with $200 per month, because the size of their loan and what they're paying per month is super small. So I recommend taking that for every single loan you have, put an A, B, C, pay off those loans that are the cash hogs, where the size of your payments in relationship to the size of the loan are taking up a huge piece of your cash flow. Pay those off first, and then work your way to the other loans. That's a key trick, and that's a key tool that you can use to pay off your loans a little bit faster. Make sure you give me a call or email, whatever. I can show you exactly how to do this. I'm telling you, this is a super efficient way, and it gets you more money back into your pocket a lot faster versus the snowball method. Again, all methods are good. All tools are good when used in the proper place. If you're in a serious cash crunch, I highly recommend using this method. Now, second tool I want to give you in regards to fixing bad credit or broken credit is a tool that some people in the industry may look down on, some people look on with good favor, and that's trade lines, okay? You have to use trade lines if you're going to use trade lines. I'm not going to say you should use it. I'm not going to say you don't have to use it. I'm just going to give you the way in which you should. I'm going to give you tools and things you need to understand before you go down that route. So if you're looking at trade lines, there's two things that my mom mentioned. And one thing is you're looking at payment history, but also you're looking at the history of yours as well, your history as well. So when you're talking about trade lines, if you're going to purchase a trade, so understand this first of all. I'm sorry, the trade lines typically stay on your report for 2 months, and then it drops off, right? After that, you can extend it for extra 30 days, X, Y, and Z, but it drops off after 2 months. Second thing with trade lines is, again, you have to watch the history. Because, say, for example, if you have 5 years worth of credit history, you buy a trade line that has 20 years worth of history. Oh, I'm gravy, baby, and it's going to pick up your credit score. After you drop it off, your average is going to be off. It's going to be extremely off. You're going to have a 20-year credit, and then it's dropped off after 2 months, and then you're back to 5. So if you're looking at trade lines, make sure you get a trade line that's closer towards the actual amount of history that you have as well. So when it drops off, it doesn't look suspicious. It doesn't also mess up your balance as well. So again, trade lines, remember, so it stays on for 2 months. You can buy additional months, but you also want to keep in mind how it's going to play with your mix as far as your time on there. If you want more information on that, also give me a call as well. But trade lines can be a very powerful tool if you're trying to buy something in the short term. It can have a lot of implications. Another thing that I want you to look at, another tool that you can look at, is if you're trying to get a quick credit boost, so maybe 10, 20 points, you could also look at these cards, Cred AI. It's what it's called. So Cred AI, it is a debit card that operates like a credit card. Okay, and basically you can't spend any more than what you use. So it's kind of like a prepaid, but it's not a prepaid, right? It operates like a debit account, but it reports as if it's a credit account. When you use that within the first for 1 to 2 months, I've seen it happen for multiple individuals. Your credit score typically jumps about 10 to 20 points just by adding that new line of credit on there. So that's a quick tip. You can also use to add some quick points to your credit score. At the end of the day, it all boils down to how you're managing your money, right? And so that's why we mentioned in the budgeting component that the first thing, we call that pyramid, at the bottom of the pyramid is protecting against uncertainty. Because the companies, they don't care about your cash flow problems. They care about how fast you're paying me on time. I want it right now. That's what they care about, because at the end of the day, they're concerned about their cash flow. Okay? Now, let's tie this back into leverage and debt, right? You see, credit cards love debt. You see, banks, the number in the banks right now, there's two things that are keeping them afloat. One, we want to talk about in 2 weeks. The other one is this, credit cards. You see, the big credit card thing, credit card payments are what's keeping banks afloat. You see, people are being late on their payments, and as they're late, they're actually being able to collect more funds. So being proper stewards of this makes us a better person. But also, remember, credit card companies and banks are using debt to expand their wealth at an exponential rate. Okay. Now let's tie this back into the end, right? So recall we said leverage. Leverage is the key. We said debt is money. At the end of the day, before we can talk about leverage, we have to understand our credit profile, what makes up the credit, right? Having good credit allows us to access money at a better rate, okay? And you want the money to be accessed at a cheaper rate so you can accelerate your wealth. So recall I said there's 6 things I want you to understand: income, expenses, assets, liabilities, cash, and flow, right? Let's go back to the beginning, because I want you to understand why and how debt is super powerful in propelling you to your wealth. So, can anybody tell me what income is? Somebody said the amount of money you bring in. Anybody online, what is income? Nobody? Okay. Do you know that income, how many, okay, do we know that there's more than one kind of income? What are they? Residual income? Hmm. Passive income? Hmm. What else? So there's 3 kinds of income, and here's what their official names are. We touched on them. There's ordinary income. After ordinary income, there's portfolio income. After portfolio income, then there is passive income, some call it residual, X, Y, and Z. Now I mention this because debt is super important because of the biggest of the big shark, which is taxes, right? So when you have ordinary income, that's the income that comes from the sweat of your brow by you physically working for that money. Okay? That is I wish I had a pen so I can show you. So that is from
Got a pen right there.
can I write on this?
Yes.
Okay. So I want you guys to see this quadrant here. Let me see if I can put it here. Can we see that quadrant online? No. Do we have a marker? Okay. So I want you to understand this. Man, don't worry about it. Think of a quadrant. One. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. In your top left square, we're going to put. So actually get a piece of paper and paper and pen out. Make a quadrant on your paper and pen on your piece of paper. Make a quadrant on your piece of paper. One line down, one line across. Do we have that? Okay. In the top left, put an E. And the bottom left, put an S. In the top right, put a B. B as in boy. And on the bottom right, put an I. Okay, so what that stands for is employee, self-employed, big business, and investments. Again, that's employee for E, small business or self-employed in S, big business in I, in B, and then I is for investment. Now, here's why I mentioned the three kinds of income. So ordinary income happens on the entire left side of the quadrant from your employees and from your small business. You're using the sweat of your brow, you're using physical labor to earn that money. Let me see if you guys can see this. Okay, good. Yes. E, S, B, I. Huh? Okay, so ordinary income is earned on this side. Okay? On this side, the B, so people think businesses are small businesses. That's not it. Portfolio income is earned in the B section. Portfolio income is this. I own a publicly traded company, and in my publicly traded company, I'm an executive. I don't get paid. I don't get paid a salary like E and S. I get paid in what's called stock options. I get the ability to buy stock at $10. It is my duty to then grow the company and raise the share price. So, say for example, hypothetically, I raise it by $6, so it's now $16, right? Once it hits $16, I then have the option to sell the shares that I had. So, say for example, I had 1,000,000 shares, right? It rose to $16. I bought it at $10. That's a delta to 16 minus 6. 16 minus 10 equals 6. Basically, I have $1,000,000. Now, here's where it gets crazy. If I was to earn $6 million in the company, I will be taxed approximately 45%, depending on where I stay, federal and state taxes. But because I have portfolio income, because I made money off of selling my stocks, I am now taxed at about 20 to 25%. So that's what portfolio interest is, income is. It's income that comes from the sale of stocks or bonds. Typically stocks though. And you can also experience this as well if you buy stocks in the market. But the problem is that oftentimes people, if you day trade, if you sell within the year, you're taxed at that 45%. You have to wait a year for long-term capital gains. You see, if you sell it before a year's over, it's short-term capital gains, and you're not going to get that portfolio income. You're going to be charged as ordinary income. And lastly, you have the passive income for the investors. That comes from investing in real estate, X, Y, and Z. So why did I bring that up? I say that is because if you're talking about paying the lowest amount of taxes, you want to use leverage or you want to use debt. Because here's what happens. If I want to buy a home for $100,000 and you have to put 20% down, if I have good credit, I can go to the bank and get that $20,000. No problem. Make that investment. But if I have to use my own money, which comes from ordinary income, I then have to make $35,000 to get $20,000 because of taxes in the middle. And so at the end of the day, you save yourself not only time, but you also save $15,000 by using debt and leverage to propel yourself forward. But you can only do that if you take care of that credit. And so that's why I say that at the end of the day, to accelerate our wealth, we want to use that leverage because that will allow us to get money easier, faster than the sweat of our brow. That's today's lessons. I'm going to open up the lines now for the chat. Yes. Oh,
We spoke about receiving a credit score. Can I get a report every month, or do I have to pay a certain amount for each time I wanted to see it?
Your credit score, you can call and get, there's a 877 number we can put in the chat that you can call, and then you also can do annualcreditreport.com, and you can request your credit score from there.
Just keep in mind, the first one's free. Afterwards, you have to pay. The first one's free.
Because it's right, it's annual. They give you that once a year.
Yes.
Yes, annually, yes. Now we're talking about your credit score. Because remember, there's a difference between your credit report and your credit score. Your credit score, you get that annually once a year as well. Your credit report, that comes out annually once a year for free.
Credit, if you're on Credit Karma, you can see your credit report anytime you log in.
Right. Now, the thing with Credit Karma, which I don't know if most people are aware, Credit Karma and all those like monitoring services, what they do is they give you your credit report based on what they call, it's called vintage score. And what vintage score is, it's a combination, it's something that all three credit bureaus came together to form. And that's why if you get like your credit score from Vintage Credit, or you look at, if you're buying a house, the number is a little different. That is why, because that is one that's generated that you get free again from like Credit Karma. But for your actual financial credit score that's coming from FICO, that is one that you will get annually from the annualcreditreport.com. One more time.
If you under because like for us, we had it where the credit, somebody tried to steal our identity.
Right.
So we have it where Equifax allows us to
go in.
and you can look at your credit score
Right.
with Equifax. So if you tied to any of the bureaus, is that considered the same thing as Credit Karma?
Credit Karma, they normally give you all three, but if you're in, because remember we have three individuals. So if you have like Equifax, you're gonna only get their number. But if you do like the annual credit score report, they'll give you, now that one you do have to pay, you'll get your score from all three, because all three bureaus have different scores that are a few numbers off. And when you're looking for a home or a car, what they do is they take the middle number.
My question is, credit score is the FICO score, right?
Yeah, credit score and FICO scores is the same, because FICO scores, they came into, it was invented in, I believe, in 1989, and the purpose for that was so credit could be done expeditiously. But yeah, your FICO score, because FICO is your, it's the same.
And should you have all of your names and history on your credit report, or you should just have one name and one address on your credit report?
Right, because anything, you want to have it where it's accurate, and anything that's not, if you have like an old address and you're no longer there, you want to have your most recent one there that's tying you in. So
they always put all
All
the
the others.
information on there. That's what I'm saying. If you just want your one name and your one address on there, would that benefit you better because you wouldn't be looking at this
This person,
over
yeah,
here like that?
it would. You can ask them to consolidate that this is your name and this is your address that you are residing in, that you've been there for a while.
If you had a good history during that period of time, though,
Yeah.
make sure you have a good history.
Any other questions?
What about if someone use your address and your credit as a identity theft, but that address is showing up on your credit report? Is it possible to get that removed?
Yeah, because you would have to write a letter to them and show proof and have them, because anything that's not on your credit report that's accurate, by law, they have to remove it. And so it's just how you would structure a letter that you would send to them. And then most people who have credit identity fraud, they have what they call, they put a freeze on their account, that if anybody tries to open up their account, they have to get a passcode that you have placed. And if you go somewhere and they try to open up, they're asking for the code. If they can't, they can't open up any credit with your score.
I noticed stuff that was shipped by them using.
Right. So we do a letter and saying that, because of the fraud, that this is not yours. You want this to remove because it's inaccurate information that shouldn't be on your report. Yes.
So, what is the number you would recommend? Like, how many credit cards should you have? Because I've heard a lot of different answers. And I know you just went over, you said it doesn't matter how many we have, but you can't use more than 30% of the total. So
Right. That question, it's a personal question of how you are maneuvering. I tell people that, you really don't want to have, more than maybe 3 or 4, that because you need to build credit. And so it depends on what your goal is. Some people, when they get their credit cards, I tell people to choose credit cards that work for you. And what I mean by work for you, most of the credit cards come now with some type of reward. Well, if you're not a person that travels, I don't want to use a credit card where it's giving me travel rewards and it doesn't benefit me. I want to use a credit card that's more in line, that will give me, say 5% if I'm going out to dinner, if I'm a person that goes out, or if I'm, 3% on gas. So that I want to use a credit card that revolves around me and not just saying I have a credit card.
At the end of the day, it revolves around your strategy. I mean, because once you have credit cards that have, say, a higher limit, say, whatever that is, other credit card companies are like mean girls. They get catty, and they want to offer you even more and more limits. So at the end of the day, if you're trying to accumulate wealth, and if you're buying, if you want to purchase, like, say for example, if you want to purchase a house, right? It may benefit you to have more, so you can increase those limits. It might be a strategy play to do that, to increase the limit, so you can also make quick and very fast payments on that, so you can get the property as fast as possible. Again, at the end of the day, it all depends on what strategy you have and your lifestyle. If you are a person that likes to travel, and eat out, you may have one travel card, one card just to eat out, and get the benefits from both of them. But at the end of the day, all is your strategy.
Right, but then also when it comes to credit cards, I got to tell people, you want to use credit cards for your advantage, and what that means is not carrying a balance, because the rewards don't benefit you. If my credit interest is 29% and they're only giving me a reward of 2%, well, they're still making 27% if I'm carrying a balance. So that defeats the purpose of having a reward, because some people just use credit cards. Okay, I got rewards, I got rewards, I got rewards. Okay, but have you looked at the interest if you're not paying them off in full? And that's the trick to make credit cards work to your advantage, is you pay them off in full. So that way you're using other people's money for 30 days. Then you're getting whatever rewards that you have. And some credit cards allow you to have cash back rewards, but it's all how you use. Personally, I tell people I've made over $1,000 using my credit card rewards. But it's the strategy of how you use the cards.
Yeah, let me actually talk about how to use a credit card and the mindset that it is to actually use a credit card. I'm so sorry we didn't go over this. So, a credit card is a one-to-one to your bank account, not an extension to your bank account. What that means is this, is that when you have a credit card, and say, for example, you have a $3,000 limit, and then if you have $100 in your account, you do not have $3,100. You have $100 for your credit card. No more than that. It is a one-to-one exchange. Whatever you have in your checkings account or whatever account you have, that's how much you have on your credit card. It is not a plus one. It's a one-to-one exchange. You have access to their money, so you're going to use. So here's why you use a credit card. So let's take a step back. Why do you use credit card? You use a credit card, so number one, to use other people's money first, because you're at the end of the day, one of the strategies that I teach is that we keep a minimum amount of money inside of our actual checking account, maybe 1 to 2 months. All the money is inside of a separate account that's growing interest and growing over time. And so what happens is that you use the other people's money first while your other money is gaining interest. As your accounts gain interest, you then replenish to your checking account. That will then flow into your credit card. But it's only a one-to-one. It is never I have a plus two. Okay? So at the end of the day, when we're talking about credit cards, understand that principle, number one. Number two, reason why we have credit card is for protection. Credit cards have this beautiful thing that we're using their money first. And so when we're using their money first, they're going to work hard for their money. Versus if you had a checking account. So say, for example, you had fraud in your checking account. It is hard to recover that money for your checking account because that's your money and it's tough luck for you. With a credit card, they're like, oh, no, this is my money that I'm spending. So they're going to fight hard for it. And you're going to, more times than not, you're going to get that money back. So credit cards are used for protection, but also it's used to use their money to allow you to earn interest on your money first. That's the rules of credit cards.
So there's a thing going around on social media that's saying that if you have a credit card balance, to increase your credit score quickly, you pay half of the balance on on 15 days before the statement is due, and then 3 days before the statement is due, you pay the other half. Is this real?
I mean, the only thing is, as long as the payment gets paid before the 30th day and you don't incur a late fee, it's going to keep your credit score up. Whether you split the payment in half or whether you pay it the 28th day, but the bottom line, as long as you pay before those 30 days, you will keep your credit up. As I mentioned earlier, when you have late payments, when you are over the limit of your credit card limit, all of that has a negative effect towards you.
Yeah, and so they also toot this a number of 30%. 30% is the bare minimum and what you want to be. You actually want to be somewhere closer towards 7 to 9% utilization on your credit cards. That will have a better and more powerful impact versus having the 30%. Just a little FYI.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I know we had some pre-questions that were sent in before.
Are credit scores true? And what are the best company to get a true score?
We covered that credit card scores are true, and as we pointed out, that they affect your auto insurance rates, your life insurance. As far as your true credit score, it's going to come from one of the three entities, whether it's Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion. It's dependent on the region that you're in. That one of the three will be your dominant one for whatever region you're in. Okay.
My pet peeve is they can get all your business, but across the credit companies or the credit score companies, they can't all get your credit right because you got good credit at Experian, but you got bad credit with Equifax or Experian.
I mean, because basically your credit scores are really based on what the lending institutions report. And so some lending institutions don't report in other parts, and that's why you may have a lower score in one of the credit bureaus versus the other. It all depends on where your financial institution reports to.
Well, this is the last comment. We dealing with crackheads, dope dealers, and mean girls.
Yes, yes. Crackheads, heroin addicts, and mean girls. Absolutely.
Are there any other questions? No?
What are some ways to save money without being heavily taxed when you want to use it?
Oh. All right. So there's. Read it one more time.
What are some ways to save money without being heavily taxed when you want to use it?
So to save money. All right. This is kind of reaching into week 5. What I like to use is what the banks use, and one tool that you can use is especially engineered and designed whole life policy. So what happens with that is that you would pull a significant portion out of your savings or what's or what's actually allowable, and you will put it inside of that whole life policy, and then you'll borrow against the balance of that from the whole life company, and then you would be able to fund different things of that sort. So that is one of the best tools that you can use out there. You can also set up a family trust as well, where you put money inside of there, and you pull your money together and have access to that. But the life insurance policy is a really strong and powerful one. So as if you have good health, it's really good because again, it's protected against judgments, liens, all those different type of things, right? So it's a really powerful thing to save money without getting taxed. And also, I want you to also know this is that when you put your money inside of a traditional savings account, the interest you earn on that is counted as ordinary income. So guess what? You're taxed for saving. If you put in a whole life insurance policy, they give you a guaranteed rate of return somewhere to the tune of maybe close to 4% year over year, and it's not guaranteed, but you may have a dividend, maybe 1.5 to 2%. So your money's going to 5.5 to probably 6% year over year, and you have access to borrow against it as well, and you get a death benefit, and you also have things like you may have riders in which you can use as well. So it's a really powerful tool to use when you're talking about storing your wealth, and it's used for the medium to long term. It's a better place to store the lion's share of your wealth versus in a traditional checkings or savings account. That's the expert.
That could be based on different things. If it reoccurred, you have to look and see if you reactivate it by responding to something. That's something that we will have to work. That is a thing that we will have to work on individually. Okay, well that's something that we have to. That's something that we have to work on a one-on-one. With collections, yes. I mean, people buy the debt, and then they could. That's when we have to see one-on-one to deal with that one-on-one.
The question is, can you repair the credit on your own? The answer is yes, you can repair it on your own, but I will ask this: what is the time value of the money? So to repair your credit, you'd have to get the education on there, and it might be easier and better to just hire an expert to help you do that, just to save you the time, the headache, right? Because the time you spend learning how to repair your credit, it may be a minimum repair, and you could be doing things to expand your education. You could be doing things to generate more cash by solving other people's problems. So at the end of the day, you can. Just it depends on how convoluted your situation is.
How many points is good to have a lower rate?
How many points is to have a lower rate?
Like, let's say the refinance or something.
620. That is the number. 620.
Comment on the credit. To repair, this is what I did to repair my own credit. Like he said, you might need an expert, but if you don't have that much stuff, and you can do it on your own. So I think Pastor Pam did another lesson before years ago, where you write your nice letter, and it's just like how they do when they come to collect your money. They say this is an attempt to collect a debt, and whatever information will be used for that purpose. You write your letter saying this is an attempt to pay a debt, and whatever you're gonna give me off on that debt for you to get a little bit of your money, then we can work and talk together, because they want some of their money. They don't want to leave out without getting any of their money. So they'll work with you on payments, or they'll work with you on lowering it. And then, with the credit report, you print your credit report, and whichever one you want to deal with first, you just write them a nice letter. At least you're reaching out to them. And then on top of that, you see what's on your credit report that's past those 7 years. You have to write them to let them know that as a consumer, you can take that off.
Right, and it all depends, on your situation, because if you're closer, if you're year 6 in debt, it makes no sense to write them. Just write it out one more year, and it'll be gone off the credit report. So you have to have a holistic look at it, and if you have the time and if you have the energy to invest into it, absolutely you can do it by yourself. If it's a little convoluted, if it's a little crazy, I would definitely recommend getting a second pair of eyes or getting an expert to look at it to help advise you on what the best strategy would be for your end. If there's no other questions, I just want to say thank you again for come to the couch and chat. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to be discussing do as they do, not as they say. And so this is going to be the beginning of understanding the infinite banking concept. So it's teaching you how to be the bank, but we'll start by showing you what the bank does and how they operate, so you can also do that for yourself. Thank you again.